For a bar on a desert planet, the Star Wars Cantina sure has seen a lot of toyetic action over the years. I mean, it has screamed for a playset since day one. And, back in the day, we had our cardboard version and we had our plastic version. And over the years, Hasbro and Kenner have been nice enough to do sort of bar sections in different scales. And, sometimes there's stools, sometimes there's no stools, sometimes there's like the middle section of the bar. But having the whole playset is really what we want. I mean, the closest we've gotten is literally a cardboard playset that came out in like 97-ish. But here we are in 2024, and HasLab, Hasbro's extension for doing high-end, expensive fan things online, has brought us the full Cantina, which you can even get the fourth wall and do a full one. Now, people have said, well, why is it so expensive? I mean, it can't possibly be the tooling, right? Because it's just like a facade with a bunch of tables. Well, let me kind of take you through that and explain the cost. Because like anything that's made of plastic, it comes from an injection molded machine. And that's everything from an action figure to a cup to a rubber stopper. So injection mold machines, as I've mentioned in many videos, are huge. They take up, they would probably fill your bedroom or your living room. And you take a giant iron metal mold and inject plastic into it. It has to be made of this iron hard metal because it has to withstand having hot liquid plastic injected into it over and over and over again. And then it spits it out on a sprue or a tree, like if you had, you remember the old like model kits when you'd have to pick things apart, that's what they have to do. Now, the question though is, why is it $400 if, you're really just replicating something like this on a bigger scale, right? I mean, it's just a backdrop, it's a table, a long table with some cups and some chairs, right? I mean, that can't possibly be that expensive. I mean, yes, there's some action figures that come with it at different tiers, and we know that action figures do have a lot of tooling, especially when you've got a fully tooled figure like some of these guys are that don't share parts with anyone. And one of the reasons for action figures also being expensive is because the more parts, the more articulation they have, well, the more expensive, because they need all these parts, as opposed to, action figures back in the 80s. Now, the sail barge was basically a sail barge shaped dollhouse. And, what do I mean by that? Well, not just Barbie dream houses, but more like the dollhouses that they had in the Victorian age, where they were really high art for displaying environments. And, I mean, this was actually a huge craze in like the 1880s. But that's basically what the sail barge is. It's just a boat-shaped dollhouse for your action figures, right? Sail barge-shaped dollhouse. I mean, you're not actually going to take it and, move it around and fight with it. You're just going to place it on a shelf and look at it. And that's really what the Cantina is. So things like this are kind of like a couch or a table, a section. The whole bar itself is really no different than most other play sets. You're getting walls, you're getting, doors, walls, and, things. I thought I was quoting something, but apparently it went away. All right. So, but the point being is, people are saying, well, yeah, so if it's just walls and doors, why is it so expensive? Well, you still have to tool this entire thing. And there's a lot of pieces there. Tooling is about piece count and size, not about articulation or features. Articulation and features can drive up the cost because you have to have a mechanism. The more pieces you have that have to be assembled, that's where you get into labor costs. But when you're just talking about the raw product, again, tables, chairs, walls, it's no different than if you were tooling a doll or an action figure or, like a Fisher-Price kitchen, or one of those, I mean, anything. So while articulation drives tooling costs, because the more articulated you are, the more pieces your figure needs, right? And if you look at the Cantina, you just think about it as a very high piece count toy. The more pieces it has, the more expensive. And action figures today, with 30 points of articulation, takes lots of piece count in order to do that. I mean, have you ever tried taking an action figure apart, putting it back together? And when I say, figures back in the day didn't have as many pieces because, yes, they weren't as articulated, so there weren't as many pieces that had to be tooled. Now, with so much more articulation, it's, yes, the labor is there, but it really is the piece count. Every single one of these pieces has to now get tooled and then assembled. So that's where your cost goes up. It's, so, taking out articulation you still have to, tool everything and take it off of the sprue or the tree, if you will, whatnot, whatever term you want to use to describe it. But this is where, again, with labor, you still have to disassemble it from the plastic tree, and whether or not it's going to articulate or have a feature once it's assembled is almost not relevant when you're just dealing with the pure cost of tooling. Tooling basically just covers the full gamut of everything. Putting it together and it actually having a feature, it moving, that's just adds to the labor and assembly cost. It doesn't add to the tooling cost. It's just purely piece count, is essentially. So a perfect example, another playset, so this was a castle-shaped dollhouse that I worked on a couple of years ago, back in 2012. And yeah, even though there were very few moving pieces, I mean, yes, the door went up and down, and there was a chair and stuff like that, but for the most part, it was just two solid walls, some floor, lots of accessories, much like the cantina, but there was no real action features. There was no motor. There was very little movement outside doors, opening and closing. Yet, the castle cost way more tooling than anything. I think the average figure back then was something like 20 to 70,000. And the castle back in 2012 days was somewhere around $350,000 in tooling. So it's all about piece count and how big it is. The castle was one of the reasons it was expensive is because it needed a very big tool, a very big mold. So, and much like the cantina and Ghost and the sail barge, they're very large items, so they need larger tools, which are even more expensive. I mean, sometimes you actually have to get a crane in order to hoist it up and put it into the machine. And all these details, all these little, the seats, the droid detector, the lights, all of that, whether or not it comes off in one piece out of the tool and it just gets painted, or each little piece has to be assembled, the assembly and the labor cost is separate from the tooling, and the tooling is what drives it. So yeah, why it's $400 is because it needs a giant metal mold. It can't just be simple like this, which produces a ball. It has to be very intricate, very detailed, and very large. Large means very expensive. And that's why the cantina and a lot of Haslab stuff costs so much, because tooling is really, really expensive. The bigger you get, the more it costs. I hope you found this video interesting, and if you did, please share with others. It's the best way to support this channel. Thanks for watching, thanks for sharing, and I'll see you in the next one.